finance computer. Okay, so welcome to the session on SU finance and like kind of how we manage your finances in for sports clubs and societies. So what we're going to cover today is a number of different things. Oh, first of all, if you've never met me before, my name's Alex. I'm sure I've spoken to many of you via email, but this is what I look like. So I'm student activities in the Students' Union, so my job is to look after you guys, sports clubs and societies, kind of with your day-to-day runnings, as well as any kind of questions that you might have. I'm kind of your first point of contact for societies. Sports clubs, obviously, you've got George and Elaine to work with as well. But by all means, send any questions, anything you kind of got queries-wise through to me, and I'll make sure they're kind of answered by the correct person. So like I said, we're going to be covering SU Finance training today. So it's not going to be a very long session. It'll probably be about 25, 30 minutes. If you've got any questions, please use the chat function to ask them. And I'll try and get to them as we kind of go through. So what we're going to go through today is kind of how SU Finance works, particularly for sports clubs and societies, how we approve finance spending and how you make purchases. The bane of my life, but everyone's the fun bit of finance, as I like to say, budgeting. So that's planning for not only just the year ahead, but also for one-off events, if you're running events. And then we're going to briefly go through some things around sponsorship as well as fundraising as well, particularly going over a little bit about contracts. And some of the important things you need to think about when going through contracts. If there's anything you think that you'd like covered, additionally, add it in. And whilst I might not have a slide about it, I will probably be able to talk about it in some level. So yeah. So we're going to start off with SU Finance and how we manage your kind of day-to-day account. So we'll start off by explaining on how the finance system works. So the SU has a big account. If you've got your sound on, can you just mute it just so we don't have any background noises? So the SU has one large account, and then within that is loads of sub-accounts. So your sports club or society will have this individual account code. So it's a 3-digit code. So for example, the Christian Union, just because you happen to be on my screen, their account code is 315. So anything that you are sending in to me, although I kind of know most of your codes off the top of my head, if you let me know, and by all means I'll share all of your account codes kind of after this session. If you just put on anything that you're sending through, just your account code, it just helps speed things up. Because it just other things that I don't have to look at. So you'll have your individual account code. Now you as a president or a treasurer, club captain, vice captain, you kind of are a little bit responsible for what goes in and out of that account. Myself and George within sport are the ones that oversee everything that does go in and out, but it's kind of your role to make sure that it's coming through to us in advance notice, and we're not kind of given invoices or payments last minute and they're suddenly appearing, because it doesn't help us. So like I said, you all have your own individual account. We don't, as an SU, we don't touch any of the money in that account. That's completely yours as a club or a society to use, and it's kept separately. Any money that you have left over from a year or the year before is carried forward. So it means that we don't just like hide it, stash it away somewhere else. It is yours for you to actually use in the coming year. But what it will not appear on is any statements. So money from previous years doesn't appear in this year's statements. So we do a year-on-year basis, but I have a log with all of like your previous any carry forward if you have any. So if you need to know that kind of thing, always ask me for a statement, and I always write on the statements how much you have kind of carried forward as well as the total. What I kind of recommend that all of you kind of do is book in a one-to-one meeting with me. It's very easy. Just drop me an email and we can schedule something in to go over your account if you have any questions about your account. You don't have to, it's not a requirement, particularly for some of you smaller societies in particular where you don't have a lot of ins and outs going in and out. It's not necessarily a requirement you have a meeting with us, but if you're one of those bigger sports clubs or one of our bigger societies which have a lot of money going in and out, it is quite helpful if I have a meeting with you just so I can have a bit of an understanding of what your money is doing, kind of where it's going, and anything that I should be expecting for when I do budgeting. So that kind of covers the overview of what an account within the SU kind of looks like. If you're having any money kind of paid in, you just give us the, we give you the Students' Union account details, and that's where your account code comes into use. So you just uses the reference on any money coming in. That's it's for, again, Christian Union 315. It just means that we know where to put the money. Okay, I hope that makes sense to everyone, and I didn't just rush through that really quickly. So the next kind of thing I'm going to quickly talk about is making purchases. Now, everything that you purchase through the students through your accounts needs to be approved before you ideally make the purchase. If, for example, it's a recurring payment, let me know what the payment is and how long it's going to go on for. So I'll use the Christian Union as an example. They've done a lot of their sessions via Zoom, so they upgraded their Zoom membership. So they have a monthly recurring Zoom membership charge, which I know is going to come in, so I can budget for that accordingly. So you don't have to get approval for each month. I've approved it for the set number of months, what it is. Now, particularly for larger purchases, if it's a small purchase, I'm not necessarily, if it's like £5, £10, I'm not necessarily concerned as much. When we're going into the hundreds of pounds, so particularly for sports clubs who might be buying equipment, so you might be buying a new set of balls, some rackets, anything like that kind of thing. We need to know that purchase well in advance. We can't accept just an invoice randomly turning up on the day and expecting us to pay it. The reason for that is you might not have the money in the account to pay for it. It might not be budgeted at all. And what we can't have is lots of clubs and societies going into a deficit. So it's really important that you come to us before you make any purchase. What we'll do is we'll give you a purchase order number. So that is a number you can provide the company that you're buying any equipment from, just so we can allocate that in your budget, and we know that that money is going to be spent. So a purchase order is like a 4 or 5 digit number which you can provide to a company, and it just means that they're aware that we're happy for that purchase to go ahead. Now, if we receive an invoice which hasn't been given a purchase order, or we've not signed it off in advance, it's quite simple, we won't pay it. And that kind of then goes down to the responsibility of whoever made the purchase to either try and get it cancelled if you can, or get it approved as soon as possible. So in the past, we've had a couple of things come in without any, without a purchase order. We've reluctantly had to pay it because we didn't want you guys getting like a court order. But we're going to have to be quite restrictive on funding this year and how we manage our finances, just because of how restrictive a lot of things are. So it's quite simple. No purchase order, no approval, it won't be paid. So that is quite, we're going to be quite firm on that this year. Now, making a purchase, there's 3 different options to kind of make a purchase. The option number 1 is that you get a BACS refund. So that means you as a committee member makes the purchase, you fill out a BACS form, provide us a copy of the receipt, and then we refund you that money. That's kind of ideal for things you need like imminently. So I don't know, you've got like a coffee and cake morning and you've gone to Tesco to buy some coffees, supplies and some cakes, and it's like 15, 20 quid. You don't mind spending that kind of money yourself. That kind of thing, perfect for a BACS form. what we don't want is you spending hundreds and hundreds of pounds and then putting that on a backs form. We don't want students out of pocket. So that's kind of where the next two kind of actions come into place. So backs form, like I said, small purchases. If it's in like an immediate kind of, you need it sooner rather than later, then do that. The next one is an invoice. So the company who you're buying anything from might be products, it might be a service, it might be like a facility hire. Ask if they can pay, if we can pay that via invoice. So by invoice, they'll send you the invoice, you pass that over to me or George. That invoice then gets signed off and paid. You don't kind of have to worry anything kind of once we receive that invoice, it'll be managed by our finance team and taken out of your club account or your society account respectively. That's kind of our preferred method of making any payments. It's really easy for us to manage, and we do payments quite regularly. So if you've ever had any kind of payments done for us before, you probably know that we're pretty quick at making payments. So it's not necessarily a worry. With invoices, again, if we've got like if we've given you a purchase order for your purchase, then that's kind of where you can place that purchase order number on an invoice. You give it to the company, they put it on the invoice, just so we know where that invoice has got to go. The final one is a credit card purchase. So this is often for like if you're ordering things online. I don't know, the Drama Society wants to order some costumes or some playbooks. That's quite often something that happens on a yearly basis, and it's on Amazon. Just send all of the details to us in like an email with links, and then we'll make that purchase using the SU credit card. As much as I'd love to give you all the credit card details, I'm not sure our finance team would be overly happy with us giving all the students the credit card details for the SU. But yeah, send it through to us, and I kind of try and do that as quickly as I can as well. And any kind of things that we make through those purchases get delivered to the SU for you to then collect. That is one thing that we try to stress. Any kind of purchases that are done through your club accounts, if it's not kind of urgently sent to you, we have it delivered to us, and then you can come and collect it from us on any of the campuses. It doesn't matter. You just need to specify where it needs to be delivered to. The reason we do that is because then we're just ensuring that what we paid for or what you guys have paid for is actually coming in. We've had in the past where people have ordered things from websites and we've never actually received it, though they've taken the money. So it's just a bit of a reassurance on our half that you are getting what you've paid for. Now, that goes on to the next thing, which is underspending and overspending. Now, underspending, quite simply, is where you end up at the end of the year with a positive account, really good. We don't mind that's the case. In which case you just carry that money over to the next year, like I said. So it's held in your account for you to kind of access in the years to go, which is great. Now, overspending. This is where we try to avoid overspending as much as we can. So overspending is where you might accidentally overspend by, in most cases, it's only usually about 5 to 10, 15, 20 pounds. There are cases where it does go into a couple of hundreds. That's where you, I don't know, had a really unexpected bill. I don't know, you've hired one of the SU vehicles and had an accident, and suddenly you've had to pay for an excess that you didn't plan for, that wasn't ever budgeted, or your equipment breaks and that was unexpected. It's supposed to last a number of years. You've had to repurchase new stuff. Whilst we, like I said, we don't encourage overspending, sometimes we understand that it might happen. Now the SU does have small, and I say small, very small, pots of money to help cover those kinds of overspends. That's not to say that we are asking or inviting you to overspend your money knowing full well that the SU will cover it, because not all years we can. So particularly this year, we're going to be very restrictive on what we can and we will allow to overspend. So that might mean we say to you, you can't run an activity or you can't run a certain thing because you simply cannot afford it. And and we can't have you going into a deficit. So that kind of is what happens in that. Does that make sense to everyone? Or does anyone have any kind of questions before I move on to the next kind of slides, moving on to budgets, about anything I've just kind of discussed there briefly? I'll leave a couple of bits for in case we have any questions come through.
Yes, Hello?
Giovanni, is that you?
Was it?
Okay, I'm guessing we've had no questions then, so I'll move on to the next slide, which is about budgeting. So, like I said, this is the fun bit of finance. So, what I do at the start of every year is I do a budget for each individual sports club and each individual society. More prevalent on our bigger societies, which I know have more ins and outs going, as opposed to our smaller societies, which is just kind of a money in for membership, money out and expenditure. So a budget, why do we do one? It's so we can kind of predict where your money's going and how it's going and how you're going to spend that money. It's important that we do one because if we don't, we kind of don't know how your money. We spent about £50 on freebies for the welcome fair through Amazon. Can this be refunded? Did you? Okay. I'm not sure why you would have spent money on freebies for welcome fair, Giovanni, because all the information I've sent out saying you can't actually hand anything out. That's been quite clear from the get-go. So I'll talk to you separately about that, Giovanni, after this. Okay. We'll talk about that separately. Right. So why do you need to do one? Like I said, it's so we can just predict kind of how you're going to function as a year, and we can plan for any like small deficits or anything in advance. If you want to have a budget meeting to kind of see how I plan that for you for your year, by all means, schedule in a meeting with me. I'm always happy to discuss budgets with whoever is responsible for it within the club, whether that's a president, treasurer, or a club captain. By all means, schedule in a meeting with me. So there's two different types of budgets that we do. One is a year forecast, which I'll show you what one looks like on the next slide. It's pretty obvious what that does. It's all of your ins and outs going for a whole financial year. And our financial year runs from August to August, or August to end of July, just so you're aware. And then there's a separate one that we do for events budgets. So an event budget might be, for example, rugby union every year do Tash Bash. So we do a event budget for Tash Bash to kind of know what monies they're going to bring in through the event and what money they're going to expend, so they can work out an overall amount of money which then goes to charity. Events budgets, again, we want to know, we want those planned before you do an event, so you're not running an event which is going to lose money. And we might say to you, you can't run that event based on the fact that it's going to lose money. Or we can do an event because it's going to make loads of money for the society or raise loads of money for charity. So event budgets before events get approved is a big thing. And then there's other things to consider as well, like fundraising budgets. That kind of falls in between the events budgets as well, and like a yearly or termly forecast. So if you're doing a fundraiser over a term or a one-off event, it is on that. Now, anything fundraising falls into two categories, which I'll go into later, which is club and society fundraising, which is where you're raising money for yourself, and then charity fundraising, which is where you might be raising money for like a certain cause or a certain charity. It is important to know that with fundraising, anything that costs, anything that you have in terms of costs to have a fundraiser is actually taken out of the money that you make, unless you're donating the cost. So you're not claiming for those costs. So a lot of people suddenly say, oh, we've raised so many thousands of pounds for charity, and then actually it costs £1,000 to put on the event. You just need to make sure that that's been taken into consideration as well. And there's in the past where we've actually stopped running events. So probably none of you used to remember, we used to do a naked calendar in the Students' Union for our sports teams. Great thing, great fun to be a part of, but it actually cost us more to do than we actually fundraised for charity. So we stopped doing it because yeah, it was actually costing us more than we'd actually be able to give to charity. So that's an example of planning ahead. So what does a budget look like? So this is what a budget looks like. I know it kind of looks like a lot of figures on a lot of pages. So like I said, we have our income and then we have it by month. So this is what the budget for the SU vehicle looks like. It's done on a basis of how many bookings I'm expecting, when I'm expecting them, and then our total in yearly incomes. We then put that against kind of all the things that go on in the outing, and then it kind of, we balance the sheets off at the end. Green is good, red is bad. So in this case, at the end of the year, the minibus is going to make a little small profit of £200, which we kind of need in the account to kind of keep the bus running. So if you have any unexpected costs, for example, a wheel needs to be replaced, we have that little bit of money which helps cover that cost as well. Like I said, all of this is planned in advance. So this is usually based on previous year's work. So if you're a new society or a new sports club, it's worth coming in and booking a meeting with me so I can actually get an understanding of what you're kind of expecting your money to do this year and where that money you're expecting it to go. That's what I do for all of the clubs and societies. So if I know what you're kind of expected, it's good. It's kind of usually easier for sport because I know how many fixtures you've got, what your transport to that fixture is, and that kind of all goes in and out. So for example, what a sports club one might look like, it'd be like membership income, fundraising income, sponsorship income, in this top row, and then in the bottom row it'd be like travel expenses, activity expenses, referee expenses, all of that within the expenditure. And our aim is to usually finish with either a small profit or a small little bit of an income, or a break-even budget. So a break-even budget is where you're effectively spending the money that you're coming in with, maybe like 10, 15, 20, up to about 50, £100 either side. So negative 100 plus 100, ideally on the plus 100 as opposed to the negative 100. Does anyone have any questions around kind of the budgets? Anyone? Yes, Bill. Hang on. Let me unmute you, Bill. Yeah, Bill, if you want to ask, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Bill? There, Bill? Bill, if you want to type the question in the chat function, that'll be fine as well. That's fine, Bill. What's the question? If the site has monthly payments each month, would you be at risk of losing money? If the society has monthly payments each month. Okay, so you're obviously referring to, obviously you have your facility expenses. Not necessarily, Bill. As long as that kind of income, if there's like an income to kind of net against it. So for example, sports clubs, historically, they have money going, payments every month, usually for facility hire. So tennis, for example, have tennis court hire every month. We get that billed every month. And we kind of know how that goes against their membership income or sponsorship income at the start of the year. So it's phased. So if you look at it in the example here, the expense on like August, for example, we know that August is going to lose money because there's more costs involved. We know that those are the costs involved with it, but we know further on along the line that it's going to profit overall. So a month going negative isn't the end of the world. It's when the end of the year it's a negative is when we start to get a bit concerned. We expect, particularly in sports clubs where they have sponsorship coming in like semester one, at the end of semester one or the end of semester two, we expect them to go into like a deficit for a part of the month or for a couple of months until that sponsorship money comes in. But that's fine because we know that that money's coming in eventually. So as long as it balances off by the end, we're happy with that. So whilst an account may look negative to start off with, it might end up as in a positive, just depends on how your club or your society kind of functions in terms of its ins and outs going. I hope that answers your question. And yes, Sam, those are the current rates of the minibus. And they're staying that this year as well. It's cheaper than the ones that we're hiring. So yeah. Okay, if there's no more questions, we'll go on to the next slide, which is about sponsorship. So sponsorship is quite an important part of mostly sports clubs, but some societies as well. And it's important to know that a sponsorship is a legal agreement. So how to try and get them. Now, a sponsorship is not necessarily, comes in two forms. It can be monetary, can be services-based or products-based. So monetary sponsorship, quite simple. A company or an individual will provide you so much money in return for so much back. So it might be things like social media posts, logos on shirts, logos on websites, those kinds of things. How to try and get them, that's always the $1 million question. And the best way to answer that question is to literally just keep asking. Now, I always say try and target companies or businesses or individuals who have some kind of affiliation or alignment, or you share like a common interest with. So for example, it would be pointless the football team going after the RFU or a rugby-based company for sponsorship, because the likelihood is the rugby-based company will only give money to rugby-based groups. So try and find companies, businesses which kind of link into what you do or what you achieve. How you approach them, usually just find details and contact them on via email or via letter. And if you get sent it to like a main contact within like a website or something, you usually pass on to the respective person. Now, like I said, it's always important to remember that the sponsorship doesn't necessarily need to come in the form of money, although it's great. to have some money come in from sponsorship. Some companies prefer not to give money, but they might give their services or some products in exchange for some similar things. So for example, and this can actually be quite a good way of getting some things like equipment for your club or your society, which otherwise would have cost you money anyway. So it might be a case of going to like a hockey, let's use hockey example. Hockey needs some hockey sticks. So they go to a hockey stick supplier and say, will you sponsor the club 5 hockey sticks or 10 hockey sticks? In response, we'll give you this. And that's a good example of products in exchange for sponsorship. It's something you would have spent money on anyway, so not receiving money is not a problem because you're getting what you were going to spend your money on anyway. Equally, some services, they might offer you services in response to other things you might offer as a sponsorship. For example, you might be running an event and you need a sound and lighting for the event because you're doing like a bit of a show. Now, a company might sponsor you the cost of the sound and lighting because that's what the company does. It provides sound and lighting. And they might give you that in return for being like an event sponsor. So by all means, those are the kinds of things as well, especially if you're running events. Products and services is a good way of getting sponsorship, and it helps reduce your events costs. So it helps either boost your profit if you're trying to run an event for profit, or help boost the amount of money that you're able to provide in a fundraiser for those that are doing a fundraiser-based event. Now, any kind of sponsorship, we kind of say it needs to have a contract. The reason we do that is it not only protects yourself, but it protects the company as well. So we've had in the past where people have agreed verbally that they would give like £300 to a club or a society in return for doing X, Y, and Z. Now, the club or society have done X, Y, and Z, have gone to the company and said, right, we've done X, Y, and Z, please can we have our £300? And then the company have turned around and said, we never agreed to that. So that's why we're really keen on making sure that everything is done through a contract and we get it signed. Now, getting a contract comes in either 2 ways. Either we can write one in the Students' Union for you, and that's not a problem. We write them all the time, so we have kind of a template ready to go. Or a company might provide their own contract based on, they might do sponsorship for student clubs nationally, and it's just like a national based contract. What we say is that all contracts have to be approved by the Students' Union. So if it is an external contract, you need to have that brought in, and someone in the SU needs to sign it to say that we've read it and we kind of we approve what's in the contract. That's not to say we don't trust you guys signing contracts, but we've had a bit of experience in the past, and we've got experience of things going well and equally things going not so well in terms of sponsorship. So we just want to make sure that you are signing up to something you can actually deliver, or equally you're not signing something that you can't. Particularly if you've got an external contract, it's really important that you read the fine print. It's very easy to go and have a meeting with someone and discuss something face to face. They put a contract in front of you, and there's like hidden things in that contract which they didn't mention when you actually spoke to them verbally. So it's always okay and always fine to, and you should be anyway, because you should be agreeing those contracts to us in the SU. Say, I won't sign this contract right now in front of you. I need to go away and have a proper read of it. And please make sure you read every fine line. If you've ever come to me in particular to get a contract signed, you know I'll spend about 5–10 minutes reading the contract and fully understanding it. I am unfortunately one of those people that do read terms and conditions, not on everything, but on a majority of things, particularly when there are when there's an exchange of money. It's really important that those contracts are signed. One thing to really mention when any kind of agreement or you're trying to get contracts, particularly with money, is are they inclusive or additional to VAT? So by inclusive, that means the VAT is taken out of the money that they sponsor. So for example, I'm getting £100 sponsorship from one of the local bars or restaurants. They say they'll give me £100 inclusive of that. That actually means that I'm getting £80 sponsorship because £20 has to go in VAT to the government. So whilst the big number looks great, that you're getting £100, in retrospect, you're actually getting 80. That's where we try to say where you can get contracts to say plus VAT or exclusive of VAT. The terms are interchangeable. I use the term plus VAT because it's a little bit easier to understand. Now, where that plus VAT comes in, it means we charge VAT on top of that money going in. So I'll use the example again, £100 sponsorship from a bar and restaurant. When we actually invoice them, we actually invoice them for 120. So you are getting that full £100 sponsorship, and £20 on top just goes to the government or to the taxman. Some companies, if they're VAT registered, can actually claim that VAT back. So it actually doesn't make any difference to them. Based on the contract, they can claim it back as a charitable donation, or however their finance system works. So it is always worth discussing that with them. But where possible, try and get that plus or exclusive of VAT written in the contract, just so it means you get the full amount of money that you're kind of expecting and not a little bit less than what you originally thought. So just a couple of other keynotes on sponsorship. So sponsorships work in both directions. And what that is you're signing in to provide something to a company in return for something. Very unlikely will someone give you something for nothing. So make sure that you are aware of that and you're not just signing a contract blindly. Look at the fine print and what they're expecting you to do in return. And it's really important to not undersell yourself. Students are a good population. A lot of companies want to try and get that target audience of that like 18 to 25-year-olds. So students are a great example of that. So really don't understand. If someone says we'll give you £100 and you think it's worth a little bit more, try and negotiate them with it a little bit, because they can get quite a lot for not a lot, particularly if you undersell yourselves. And really try and see what the sponsor can offer you. Like I said, money's great, makes the world go round apparently. But if they can offer you additional services as well, or on top of any money, that's always a bonus. So things like a discount code for like a website which you can pass on to your members. It doesn't really cost that company much, but it's an offer that they can give to you. Things like that is really good. How I kind of offer sponsorship, and when you're going to go to companies, it's always good to go to them with like a bit of a specific kind of detail. This is where I kind of go on to like different tiers of sponsorship to suit different people. Very rarely will someone just offer you sponsorship because you've asked for it. They kind of want to know what you're willing to provide in return for X amount of money, and there's always room for negotiation. So you need to say, like, is it just social media promotion? In which case, that's not really worth a lot of money. It's £100, £150 kind of ish. Yes, you've got loads of viewers and stuff, but there's a lot of other things you can be doing. Is it an event promotion? So the sponsor is sponsoring an event and you'll have all their logos everywhere because it's an event. Is it a clothing promotion? So your kit be have the company logo on the sleeve, on the shirt, or on the society hoodie, t-shirt, those kinds of things. Or is it a combination of all of them? On the next slide, I've kind of done like a bit of example for you. And I always like to think that, and it's a really big important thing, is be realistic with your sponsorship. A company might ask the world of you. Don't sign it because you can't actually realistically deliver that, because it'll just bite you in the back when it comes to the end of that contract. So be realistic on what you can offer, but also be realistic on company expectations as well. And also be aware that no is an acceptable answer, and that's both ways. Companies will say no to you. Please don't be disheartened about it. It is a case of just keep going. Equally, you can tell a company, actually, no, what you originally thought was a great sponsorship. When you actually get the contract in front of you, you could turn around and say, actually, I don't want to sign this. It's not good for the society. It's not good for the club. So no is an acceptable answer. And often there are things that the students union, when we get contracts, will say, you can't sign this contract because this isn't acceptable. Now, in terms of like what we kind of allow as sponsors, we don't really have much of restrictions on who can sponsor what. The only things that we don't allow are sponsors from gambling companies, tanning bed, oddly, it's a historic one. So tanning beds and tanning products, that's banned. And then we have some limitations on things like alcohol sponsors as well. So things with alcohol sponsors is a whole additional set of rules that we apply to it as well. So please, if you are looking at getting like an alcohol sponsor from like a, and that by alcohol sponsor, I mean like a actual brand of alcohol sponsoring you, as opposed to like a bar sponsoring you. Get in touch with me before you kind of want to approach that, so I can give you those details. It's all about things like making like drinkware, prominent places to go alongside the branding and things like that. So just as an example, some packages like this is what I've kind of done in the past. So we have 3 different packages. We have a bronze package, which is just like a company logo on like a matchday team sheet or on social media. An additional post about the company like once a week. The opportunity to talk to club and society members. Or if it's like an event sponsorship, specific placement of company logo on advertisement in event. Like I said, these prices aren't like hard set. You can kind of think about what your worth is, but these are just basic prices. So like around about £50 to £100, that kind of thing. Silver package, again, it's kind of the same things that's offered in the bronze package, but just a little bit more. So they might have a logo on like a warm-up t-shirt or a event t-shirt, more posts on social media, and like you might offer as a club to go and help a company. So in the past, we've had teams or go and actually work with a company for a day, like helping move stuff or helping like build things for like an afternoon in return for getting some money. So those kinds of things are things you might want to consider if you're approaching local like businesses and things like that. And then like a gold package is like your big kind of money, your 800 plus, £1,000 plus kind of sponsorship. That's kind of your like match day clothing, your like clothes that you walk around as a society on like a regular basis. The one that you'll get like a bigger exposure, they're effectively paying for a large exposure, and things like that. I hope that's kind of covered things like sponsorship. I'll leave some time for questions. If anyone's got any questions, either raise your hand or ask it in the chat. So I'll leave it a couple of minutes just in case anyone has any questions on that. In terms of sponsorship, once the contract's signed, all of like the getting the money from the company, that's all dealt with by us in-house. So you don't have to worry about that in that sense. And the money goes straight into your club accounts, club or society accounts. It just goes straight into there. We don't put it anywhere else. Leave it a little bit longer in case anyone has any questions. No questions. Okay, no questions. I'll assume there is no questions. Okay, so fundraising, we'll just have a brief overview in there. So putting the fun in fundraising, in raising money. So like I mentioned earlier, there's two forms of fundraising. Club, society fundraising, or then charity fundraising, where you're raising money for a external charity or an external business or an external cause. It's important that you know the difference between the two, and it's important that we know the difference on what you're raising the money for. The reason we do that is because as a charity ourselves, we have to be quite cautious on giving large sums of money to other charities. It's not allowed unless the activity or the event is specifically for that. So that's why we need to know, is it raising money for a club or a society, or is it raising money for a charity? Because there's additional things that we have to do as a charity to declare those kinds of transfer of monies in and out of our accounts. So when you're doing a fundraiser, it's important to consider why you're doing it. Are you doing it to raise an exposure of a certain cause or a charity, in which case is raising money the secondary thing to that, or is the main cause to actually raise money for a certain charity? And it's important to plan ahead when it comes to that. So that's where a budget meeting for an event will come in handy, and you need to come and book an appointment to see me about that, and go from there. Because this is where the expenditure versus income comes in. So like I said, any expenditure, unless you're getting it donated, in which case it doesn't matter as much, but any expenditure for an event, for charity fundraising, goes against the income. So if you raise £100 for a charity, but you spent £110 doing it, you're actually at a net loss of £10. That's not to say we're going to go after the charity and ask them to give £10 to us. That's not how it works. But it just means that that money will, that £10 will come out of your club's central budget to cover that deficit. Equally, if you raise £100 and you only spent a £10 doing it, that £90 will then go to the charity or into your club account. If you're raising money for yourselves, to go into the account. So that's where it's important to plan ahead. It's pointless planning a fundraiser if it doesn't raise any funds, is the kind of go-to line here. So really important that you understand that. And then there's kind of a third way of kind of bringing money. It kind of falls in within fundraising, and that's crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is a way where you might set up you have something that you want to buy. So you want to crowdfund for a new goalkeeper kit, because goalkeeper kits in hockey are very expensive. So you need to buy all the pads. You want to crowdfund for that. Now, crowdfunding is a way of doing it. It's where, so there's a couple of crowdfunding websites. You can go online. Crowdfund.me, I think, is one of them. Just Give and do a crowdfunding as well. Trampolining did this last year as a bit of an example. So crowdfunding is where you get people to donate any kind of money. There's no kind of expectation of anything in return. It's just people donating money, and they're crowdfunding for a certain thing. So for example, like I said, you're buying a new goalie kit for your hockey team. Or you're buying some new books for your society and you want to crowdfund for them. So you want people just to give you money to do that. Now that's a great way of getting money into the club, particularly from like family and friends, or like a local business that doesn't want a big contract, or they're not expecting anything. They just want to give you money for the sake of giving you money, but they want that money to be put to a certain thing. That's where crowdfunding comes in. If you want to talk about crowdfunding, do just get in touch with me, and we'll look at how we set that up for you in that sense. So that kind of covers everything that I want to go through today. I hope it kind of helps explain a little bit how financing the SU works, how it affects you as a club or society. But if anyone has any questions, by all means, fire them away. You could by all means unmute yourself and ask them. Unmute yourself and ask them, and we will go from there. Any questions? I'll give it like 5-10 minutes for any questions, and then we'll leave it there. Any questions? Thank you, Alex, DJ, and Kath. Don't know who I'm talking to, but thank you for all three of them. Ideally, when is the best time to secure sponsorship by? It's always $1 million question there, Anna. Ideally, it's done kind of the start of the year. August, September time is the best time to kind of get those discussions going, but the sooner you can get it in, the kind of the better. Companies in particular, if you're looking at businesses, this might be applicable if you're looking in advance, looking for next year. Companies usually plan their budgets around April, May time. So if you can get in around April and May, talking to companies for the next academic year, it's always they're more likely to have additional funding because they know what their budget is for the year. But kind of by the end of September, October, we see the most sponsorship contracts kind of being signed by us. So that's not to say we don't get them throughout the whole year. We do. So there isn't necessarily a best time to secure a sponsorship, but the earlier you can do it in the academic year or around the financial year, which is April to April, is often the best kind of places to see it. Yeah. Will sponsorship be hard to get with the COVID-19 outbreak? Good question, Bill. And the answer to that is we're expecting to see like a little bit of reduction in sponsorship, particularly from things like bars and like nightclubs. We're probably not going to see sponsorship from them as much this year, mainly due to the fact they're not open as much, or they're not open at all in terms of like nightclubs. So we're not necessarily that, but that's where I think approaching kind of different sponsors than you traditionally would might come into hand. And like I said, look at things where sponsorship for products or services might be more abundant this year. People might be more willing to give you products as opposed to money because they might have an abundance of certain things because it's not been sold for over the whole of the lockdown period. So I wouldn't rule it out, Bill. No, I wouldn't say that. I think sponsorship will just be different this year is probably the better answer to the question. And we've already had a fair amount of contracts come in from a number of clubs and a couple of societies for a few hundreds of pounds, so it doesn't seem to have affected them, no. Any other questions? So like I said, this session was recorded, so if you want to go back and watch it, by all means, go back and watch it. So I'm planning on uploading these towards the end of this week. If there's anything that I covered and you want a bit more detail on, or if there's anything I didn't cover that you want answered, by all means, please just drop me an email. You all have my email address. I try to get back within like within a day at least, as like a kind of a maximum. And I will get those answers to you. Thank you all for attending. If any of you are hanging around for the session later on today at 3 about just like social media, well, I will see you then. But until then, I shall hopefully speak to some of you all soon. Thank you, everyone.